Welcome back to Making Money Matter, ladies and gentlemen. I'm your host, Kerry Stevenson. Today, I've asked Conrad Todd. He is the Managing Director of Triangle Energy. The ASX code is TEG. Now, Conrad, this is great. Look, he's English, but we won't hold that against him. He was retired. So what do you have to do to get a retired oil and gas guy back into the market? Give them a compelling reason. Very different is the oil and gas industry from mining. So I want you to sit up. It's fascinating. They're over in the Perth Basin in WA, and lots is going on. So I wanted to find out more from Conrad. Great to see you. Thanks so much for joining me today, Conrad.
Very much for having me on, Kerry. It's my pleasure.
Now, I just said in the intro there, I think you've been 21 months in the hot seat. You were retired, Conrad. Must have been pretty compelling to get you back.
I was very happily retired, and this opportunity came up. Someone I knew was asked by some of the primary investors in the company to see what they could do. They offered me the job as managing director. I had to think long and hard about it. The company was in a bit of a sorry state. I decided that it was going to be a challenge, and a real fun challenge and exciting. It certainly has been. The first 6 months were particularly stressful, but we got the company through that. I think we've turned it around. The share price demonstrates that. I actually bought a lot of shares in my first year. I spent most of my first year's income on shares in Triangle, and I'm very pleased to say that my investments are up maybe 80% at the moment.
Okay.
So it's looking good.
And you don't, so basically you put your first year's salary into the company. I hope your wife was in agreement with that.
She now has put her foot down. I'm not allowed to buy any more shares just yet. However, I talked her into buying some shares as well. So I thought that was a bit of a result.
That's a brave man. That's a very brave man. Well, look, Conrad, what I want to find out, because the oil, as I said in the intro, the oil and gas industry, very different from mining. Who are Triangle Energy? Just give us a brief overview, and then I want to dig into where the value for shareholders is going to come from.
Certainly. Triangle is a company that about 7 or 8 years ago picked up a 78.75% interest in the Cliffhead oil field. It's a small oil field, 300 kilometers north of Perth, just offshore, 14 kilometers offshore in federal waters. And I think the idea was that they were going to drill around the oil field and find more oil and put more production through there. That never eventuated. And a couple of years ago, the oil export route was changed because it was trucked down to BP's refinery and export facilities in Kwinana, just south of Perth.
Yep.
And BP shut that down. And it kind of chopped Triangle off at the knee. And it really impacted their viability and their future. So we came in and we had to devise a new export route. And it's a complex route. We've had to charter our own tanker, and we fill our own tanker up with the oil produced from Cliffhead. We produce 600 barrels a day. And we send that tanker off up to Singapore once every 10 weeks or so to unload the oil there and come back. It's kind of tough, and it's expensive and hard work. But what it's doing is it's allowing us to keep Cliffhead going until such time as we get approval to do something better with it. So the Cliffhead field itself is a very late life asset.
Okay.
So it's got about 3 years of economic production left in it, at which point normally you'd have to rip it all out and take it away. Now that's $350 million worth of equipment there. And it would be really nice if we could find something to do with it rather than just rip it out and scrap it. And what we have decided with our partners, Pilot, is that we could turn it into a carbon capture and sequestration project. That reservoir that the oil came out of, we could put carbon dioxide into it.
Oh,
So we'd reuse all the equipment there, and we can accept carbon dioxide from the onshore gas fields in Perth and the nearby industrial areas, and actually just reverse the oil field and put carbon dioxide back into the ground. And it'll stay there for geologic time, so longer than we are going to be on planet Earth. So we applied to do that just over a year ago. And we are still waiting for the first of two approvals to come through. In the meanwhile, we've decided that we actually want to make Triangle into a mid-cap oil and gas company, and our partners, Pilot, want to go down the alternative route.
okay.
So we have agreed that when we get the first of two approvals from the regulator, we'll sell our interest to them. They'll have the whole of Clifford oil field, and they can go ahead and make that into a carbon capture project, and then put any other bolt-on projects they might want to do, such as blue-green hydrogen.
Who are Pilot? Just by way of background.
There's actually a rather interesting history. Pilot was a company called Rampart, an oil company that had an asset in Alaska. And the management was changed out in Pilot about 7-8 years ago.
Right.
And I was asked to be a non-exec director at that time. So it's rather amusing that I've actually been a non-exec director of our partner in the past. It went through several iterations, including basically a change of control by Chinese investors. And then they bought Royal, who have a 21% interest in the Clifford oil field, and determined that they wanted to go down that route of alternative energies and carbon capture. So there's a certain circularity in the industry. It's a very small industry.
Yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
And they will, when we get the first approval from the regulator, which we expect Q1 next year.
Okay.
So I would guess sometime in March, that deal will go through. And when that deal goes through, we'll be given in stages $15 million, and we'll give the field, Cliffhead Field, with its abandonment liability, will go to Pilot for them to do what they will with it.
If Pilot wasn't around, would it have been even viable? Would you have had to, I mean, how would it have worked if Pilot wasn't around to take this over? Because you've got to do a rehabilitation. Yep. And that potentially sounds like a lot of cash that would have had to be found to rehabilitate that field. So this is a win-win for both sides, I assume.
It's great. It's a really good idea. It's a worthwhile good thing to do. It's just not where we want to be in business. So it's a win-win situation for both of us. And one of those very few where the two companies, when they separate, will actually run faster. Love it.
That sounds good. I want to talk about what you're doing going forward as well. But before I do, would you mind, Conrad, can we just do a quick one-on-one with the oil and gas industry? Because it's big numbers, isn't it? Because you just said that there'd been about $350 million spent on the Cliffhead oil field. I'm thinking, that's a reasonable sum of money. But these wells, just a brief, if you wouldn't mind, 101 on the oil and gas industry.
Absolutely. I find Australian investors are quite up to speed on mining. Yep. And a lot of people here are less knowledgeable about oil and gas. They're extractive industries. They're actually very different in the way their investment and the risk goes. So in mining, you might drill a couple of quite cheap core holes to prove up a resource, and then you drill a lot more to extend it. In oil and gas, we don't know what's down there. It's 2 to 5 kilometers below the Earth's surface. And we have to use remote sensing. We use 3D seismic. It's very expensive. We just spent $4 million on a small seismic survey in the North Perth Basin. And you still don't know if there's anything there. That just gives you a good picture of the subsurface. Then you have to drill a well. And in our case, we're drilling onshore. Onshore is much cheaper than drilling offshore.
Okay.
Well, our well's probably going to cost $8.5 million. Our first gas target, Booth. And generally, on a worldwide basis, you've got a 12.5% or 1 in 8 chance of success on an exploration well. So if you think about that, you're putting a lot of money in on effectively a 1 in 10. You've got to get a valuable discovery out of that every now and then out of drilling. As it happens, we believe that the upcoming wells we're going to drill in our North Perth Basin blocks have a 1 in 4 chance of success, 25%. And I'm a very conservative person, so we went through that in great detail. And it's one of my previous jobs was a resource and chance analysis. Then I asked my guys to go and look at what actually is the chance of success that's happened in the Perth Basin. We looked at anything that's been drilled on 3D seismic, and it's actually 60%, not 25%. So we've been a little bit conservative there. The Perth Basin is the hottest bit of acreage in Australia for oil and gas, and it's having a real tear. It's been really successful for a lot of companies. Sorry, carry on.
What's the history of the Perth Basin? So this is onshore.
Yeah.
Give us an idea of where it is. Is it close to a port? Is it got lots of infrastructure? Who else is there?
It runs from essentially from just north of Perth to Geraldton, just south of Geraldton.
Okay.
So it's about 150, 200 kilometers long and about 50 kilometers wide. What's going on there at the moment is it started off as an oil basin. So there were several modest oil fields found there, and they made the companies a lot of money, and some gas fields in shallow reservoirs. A while ago, one of the companies drilled deep, and they found gas in a deeper reservoir, the Kingia. That company was since bought by Mitsui. So Mitsui and Beach have a field called Waitsia with 1 trillion cubic feet of gas, 300 kilometers from Perth. Perth's really short of power. It's short of gas. It's short of energy.
Yeah.
Since then, Strike have drilled and they have found the West Erregulla field. Their partner was Warrego. Warrego were bought by Hancock Prospecting for $440 million. Just between that field and our block, Norwest were drilling with Mineral Resources. They found the Lockyer Deep gas field. Mineral Resources bought Norwest, which had a 20% interest for $450 million. And then just to the south, there's a gas field called Walyering, which Talon and Strike had 50-50. It's a kind of modest size. Strike have just bought Talon for about $130 million. So there's an awful lot going on in the Perth Basin. There's a lot of activity and some really big billionaires muscling in there at the moment.
So is this, there's plenty more to come, given your background and understanding, what's your confidence level? Because if I just step back a bit, the offshore, the Cliffhead oil field, that's been sold, if you like, offloaded almost to pilot. That's a done deal, but we're just waiting on approvals. But the focus now is in the Perth Basin with your Booth project. That's what you're looking at now. So step us through. I'm talking to you as we come up to the end of 2023. Talk us through what you're doing, the steps, if you like, where you can see the shareholder value coming as you move through this?
Certainly. We have acquired 3D seismic over those blocks last year. We paid $4 million for that.
Wow.
It's really good. Three-dimensional seismic changes our view of the subsurface. You can see the structure really clearly. What you can't see is whether there's oil or gas down there within the sandstones or just water. And that has to be drilled to find that out. But we've now identified that the same reservoir that all those gas fields are in goes into our block. The same structural regimes, so the same sort of potential containers go into our block. Since then, we have brought in two partners because we're only a little company and we don't have that much free cash. So we bought Talon in. They took a 25% interest.
Okay.
And then we bought New Zealand Oil and Gas in for a 25% interest. So we still have a 50% interest in there. They've paid for the 3D seismic. They've given us our money for that. They're going to pay most of the cost of drilling 3 wells in those 2 blocks that we have there. So they believe it's very attractive. As it happens, Talon has been bought by Strike. So as of January the 1st, we'll have a new partner in there. And they are somewhat larger than us, big company who are actively drilling in the area, looking for gas. So that's going to be very interesting. So we have identified a series of prospects in this block. We have the partners are going to pay our way through most of the costs of drilling 3 of them. The first one will be the Booth prospect.
Yep.
In the southeastern part of the block. It is primarily a gas prospect with a best estimate or P50 prospective resources. That's not yet found, but when it's found, recoverable of 280 billion cubic foot of gas. Now, give people an idea what that's worth. 1 billion cubic foot of gas discovered in the ground in the Perth Basin, according to our economics, is worth $2 million. So
just repeat that again for us.
1 BCF, billion cubic feet of gas, discovered in the ground is worth $2 million. So if we discover 280 billion cubic feet of gas, which is our most likely estimate, that's got an NPV10 of $560 million. And we would have a 50% interest in that.
And so I was just about to say, so it'll be 280 million, and actually your market cap today is about 30 mil. But
so essentially a zero on our market cap, yes.
Yeah. But at the same time, there are steps that you need to go through to get there. And what's interesting to me is you said Talon, now Strike, 25%, New Zealand Oil and Gas, 25%, leaves you with 50%. I'm just curious, why have they come on board and agreed to this expenditure? I'm asking that question because I'm thinking, do they know something that we don't know?
They looked at the opportunities and the series of prospects that we have, and they thought that was attractive. It's cost them essentially $10 million each to come into this block.
Okay, yeah.
So for them, it's a reasonable entry into something that has very good upside, a real high upside, and it's a company maker.
So it's been a very busy 21 months since you've come into the company. Clearly, we've spoken Cliffhead, we've spoken Booth. What I want to know is, as we come into 2024, is the Cliffhead oil field, is that going to take much of your attention, or is that, look, Kerry, we've done the work, we know what happens there. That's not where the focus is. The focus is on Booth. I'm looking for shareholder value going into 24.
Sure. We have about 30 employees in Triangle, and about 25 of them are working solely on Cliffhead.
Okay.
So we're still working flat out, keep it producing, maximize the production we can get out of it, and actively cutting costs on production and export. So whilst we have it, we work that really hard.
Okay.
The other 5 people are focused on getting the Perth Basin drilling underway, and we're hoping to drill that Q2 next year for our first well. And then we also look at new ventures, because you can't make an oil company with just 3 blocks. You have to have some width and some depth in timing as well. So you have to have a time frame which you're going to carry on exploring into the future.
Is that going to be just in the Perth Basin area, or are you saying that could be anywhere?
We started looking primarily in Australia and Asia.
Mm-hmm.
We saw that the UK opened up after having had their foot on the hosepipe for oil and gas exploration for quite some time. They've opened up and put everything into a license round last year. It's really attractive. So we bid with 3 groups of companies. We pulled in all of our contacts. The first of our bids has been analysed and awarded.
Oh.
And we've been awarded the Cragganmore gas field off the west coast of Scotland. It's about 500 BCF of gas recoverable. We need to do some work on it, and then we need to discuss with the company next door to us, who is Shell, and they have about another 500 billion cubic foot of gas in 2 smaller gas fields. If we get together, we've probably got an economic hub to start producing gas.
Why would Shell want to get into bed with Triangle?
Because their 500 BCF is probably not getting over the economic threshold. We have to combine the 2 together to get 1 trillion cubic foot of gas, and that is probably going to, well, I'm sure that's over the economic threshold for that part of the world.
How open are they? And so you've been awarded that block? Is that what you're saying?
We have, yes.
So there's a focus with that as well, because I know one of the things with you, Conrad, is you're very conscious of shareholder money being spent wisely. So is that going to take very much of your attention?
It's going to take a fair bit of our attention. For the first 3 years, at least, it's going to be quite low expenditure.
Okay.
And that is going to be operated by a company called Athena Energy. And they work out of Scotland. I know the guy who set that up. I used to work with him. I'm very happy that they're going to do a good technical job, but we'll do our own work as well as a counterbalance to them.
All right, we're running out of time. I want to find, if you find a gas discovery in the Perth Basin, game on.
Absolutely. If we make a gas discovery, things are going to happen.
So what do you need to do what are the steps that you need to do to get that underway? Have you got to get some landholder agreement? Like, just talk us very, very quick, briefly. What are the steps that you've got to do to get that underway?
Certainly. We have to get a rig to drill that well. And there are 2 suitable rigs in the Perth Basin. They're both pretty busy. We have a sniff that one might be available in a time frame that would suit us. In order to sign that rig, we have to get approval from the government regulator for our environmental permissions to drill a water well, and approval of our new safety case, our safety management system. And we also have to get landholder approvals. So we're going to be working very hard on that over the next 2 months.
Do you see any challenges with that, or is it a process?
It's a process. We don't have much control over the time frame of it, because you're dealing with government entities and they work at their own speed. They're not driven by the same commercial drivers as we are.
Yeah.
And we understand that. We just have to work through with them and hope that things come to fruition fairly swiftly.
Conrad, Fascinating. I love it. As you said, the cliff head is taking a bit of attention, but it's also bringing some revenue into the company, albeit a little bit circuitous, having to take it up to Singapore. Why we shut that? What's it called?
Kwinana refinery.
Kwinana.
Yes.
But just sum it up for us, if you wouldn't mind, Conrad. 3 reasons you think that people should be sitting up and taking notice of Triangle Energy, ASX TEG, right now.
Okay, thank you. Reason number 1, sometime in the Q1 next year, we will confirm that we have sold Cliffhead to Pilot. That's going to be a major event for our share price. Somewhat earlier next year, we hope to sign a rig. We understand that there are lots of potential shareholders sitting on the sidelines. When we announce that the rig is signed, they'll jump in, because then it's a hard truth that we're going to be drilling the Booth well, which has a 1 in 4 chance of putting a 0 on our market cap.
Wow.
Later in the first half, with a bit of luck, we'll drill the Booth well, and we will also drill a shallower, cheaper oil prospect called Because, with a best case estimate of 5 million barrels. That's still worth $100 million. 5 million barrels is about $100 million. So it's going to be a really exciting and somewhat frantic first 6 months of next year.
Clearly, he's got a very understanding wife, ladies and gentlemen, because as I said right at the start, how do you get a retired guy to get back to work? Give him a challenge and let him turn a company around. But I also think it's important that you understand, this is not financial advice either. Do your own research or reach out to Conrad. But if they find a gas discovery in the Perth Basin, things are going to be looking interesting. They've got that project up just off Scotland, bloody cold up there, and also the opportunity with Pilot to change that to a carbon capture storage system. So, goodness me, you've been a busy man. So put on your watch list, ladies and gentlemen, or reach out to Conrad. As I said, its ASX code is TEG. They're just getting started. Massive turnaround. Thanks for joining me on Making Money Matter.
My pleasure, Kerry. Thank you very much.